Chosen one, your journey did not begin with heartbreak. It began in the quiet, luminous warmth of trust, a trust that once seemed as eternal as the stars. In those first days, you stepped forward with an open chest and a spirit eager for connection, offering yourself fully, unguarded, unaware that love could sometimes become a crucible. Every word you spoke to your lover was honest and unpolished. Every gesture of care free of calculation or strategy, because you still believed that goodness, when given freely, would naturally return. In their gaze, you thought you saw your own longing mirrored back, a silent pact, or so you hoped, to cherish and to build together. The world was gentle then, the air around you lighter, your dreams uncomplicated and sweet, and you began to build a life around that hope, shaping yourself to fit the space you believed love had prepared for you. But as time unfolded, you started to notice the small, almost invisible seams coming undone in the tapestry of your relationship. Words of affection sometimes became weapons thrown with casual precision to wound you just enough to keep you guessing. You felt a strange chill in moments that should have been warm, a silent withdrawal, an emotional absence masked by hollow reassurances. You questioned yourself endlessly, searching for the flaw in your own reflection, wondering if your sensitivity was a burden rather than a gift. Still, you held on, chosen one, convinced that patience could heal, that love could weather any storm if only you bent far enough, gave deeply enough, forgave quickly enough. The cost was subtle but steady. You gave and gave until you barely recognized the person you saw in the mirror each morning. Yet inside, something ancient and indestructible watched all of this unfold, a quiet witness within your soul, taking note of every sorrow and every lesson, preparing for a transformation you could not yet name. The breaking point did not arrive with fireworks or thunder, but with a single, weary breath. One evening, as you sat together in a room that had once been filled with laughter, your ex-lover's words seemed to slip beneath your skin like cold water. There was an accusation, a twist of truth, a subtle rewriting of your shared story, an attempt to make you doubt your memories, your intuition, your very self. For the first time, instead of apologizing for your feelings, you simply looked at them and saw, with painful clarity, the web of manipulation. You saw how love had been transmuted into control, how affection had become a currency, traded for your silence and your compliance. In that moment, you felt a deep, shuddering sadness, but beneath it, a spark, the first stirring of your own power, as if your soul was quietly gathering itself for a rebirth. In the days that followed, you lived in a strange half-light, walking through your routines as if sleepwalking, but something inside you had shifted forever. You began to notice the ways you had been taught to doubt your own desires, to minimize your needs, to shrink your boundaries to accommodate another's comfort. But as you moved through the quiet hours of your new solitude, you felt your body begin to reclaim itself, as if every cell remembered what it was to belong wholly to you. The ache did not vanish overnight, but you no longer feared it. Instead, you began to treat your pain as a teacher, listening to what it had to say. And with every breath, you grew a little stronger, chosen one, no longer a victim, but an awakening soul preparing to claim a new kind of energy, a new kind of life. There is a power, chosen one, that awakens only after you have been unmade, after your trust has been tested and your heart has learned the terrain of betrayal. At first, you did not know this power belonged to you. It felt like a quiet warmth hidden beneath the grief, a current of strength that hummed under the pain, waiting for you to recognize it. In the silence that followed your loss, you began to notice how your own presence filled the room, how the emptiness left by your ex-lover became a canvas for rediscovering your own shape. It was not a sudden transformation, but a steady, stubborn reclaiming of your body, your mind, your sensuality, the inheritance you were born with but had never fully claimed. You remembered what it was to move for the sake of pleasure, not performance, to feel the pulse of desire in your veins without shame or guilt, to know that your energy was not a commodity to be taken, but a flame to be tended and honored. As you explored the boundaries of your own hunger, you found that it no longer bent itself to fit another's appetite. You began to recognize the subtle difference between longing and lack, between generosity and depletion, between intimacy and enmeshment. Your ex-lover, sensing this shift, tried the old tricks. Familiar words, practiced glances, invitations to the same old dances. But you, chosen one, had become different. Where once you would have felt a magnetic pull toward their approval, now you stood in your own gravity, anchored and unmoved. There was a new tension in the air when you met them again. A silent battle of energies, one seeking to draw you back into the web, the other radiating out from you with calm, quiet force. Your ex tried to stir old patterns, to provoke reactions, to tempt you into repeating the script where you played the role of the eager, vulnerable lover. But you no longer recognized yourself in that part, and your refusal was not defiance, but simple truth. You had nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to fear. Your sexual energy, once fragmented by longing, had become whole, no longer dissipating into the hands of those who could not honor it, but circulating within you like a living current. You felt powerful in a way that required no audience, no explanation, no validation from anyone outside yourself. With every encounter, your ex-lover saw less of the person they once manipulated and more of the being you had become. Present, grounded, quietly radiant. They could not name the change, but they felt it. A door that would never open again, a fire they could no longer touch. And you, chosen one, did not need their understanding or their regret. Your liberation was not for them, but for you. A sacred gift born from your own courage to let go, to grow, to burn away everything that was not true. You walked away from that chapter carrying a new energy. A sexuality rooted in self-respect, a presence that was unshakable, and a sense of possibility that no manipulation could ever reach. This was not the end, but the beginning of your real power. And in the fullness of that presence, you began to live as you were always meant to, free, whole, and deeply, irreversibly alive. The transformation in you, chosen one, was silent yet unmistakable. A subtle shift at first, but with every passing day it deepened, like roots finding their grip beneath the surface. You woke not with the burdened heart of the past, but with a growing sense of anticipation, a rare and golden clarity that could not be feigned or borrowed. In the mirror, you saw the traces of heartbreak, but also the emergence of a new self. A self that looked back with steady eyes, unafraid of its own reflection, no longer hiding behind apologies or seeking approval from someone who once used your hope as leverage. There was an aura about you that others noticed, even if they could not name it. Your steps became more deliberate, your words chosen less out of fear and more out of the deep, welling certainty that you were enough. Where you had once moved through your days in a fog of uncertainty, now there was a new kind of gravity in the way you carried yourself, an undercurrent of calm strength. It was as if the very cells of your body remembered their purpose, remembered what it meant to belong wholly to you and to no one else. The world responded in kind, shifting around you, offering up small confirmations of your change. Strangers held your gaze longer, friends listened to you more intently, even silence seemed charged with promise rather than threat. Your sexual energy, long diffused and tangled in someone else's confusion, had gathered itself, become refined and focused, humming just beneath your skin with an intensity that was both alluring and inviolable. Your ex-lover, sensing your new boundaries, tried again to draw you back into their orbit. Their messages arrived like echoes from another life, testing the edges of your resolve with nostalgia, charm, and a carefully measured vulnerability. Where you might once have felt a tremor of longing, now there was only a gentle, unshakable awareness of how far you had come. You answered with a steady presence, not cold or cruel, but simply honest, never rising to the bait, never letting yourself be baited into the old dance. In every exchange, you set the tone, holding your energy close, neither offering it freely nor wasting it on those who could not recognize its worth. It became clear to you that your ex was no longer seeking love or even connection. What they sought was the power they once held, the sense of control that came from knowing they could shape your emotions with a word or a glance. But you had changed the rules. Your sense of self was no longer a shifting shadow in their presence. It was the solid, living truth around which your entire world now revolved. You had learned to draw strength not from the approval or affection of another, but from the steady, nourishing current of your own spirit. The need for external validation faded, replaced by the quiet thrill of being able to stand alone, radiant and undiminished. Every time your ex tried to re-enter your life, they found themselves confounded by the quiet, dignified boundaries you now embodied. No longer were you the eager participant in their games. Instead, you became the mirror in which their own insecurities and desires were reflected back, unchanged and untouched by your former vulnerability. You found joy in the simplest acts, in taking care of your body, in cultivating new friendships, in pursuing interests that had lain dormant beneath the rubble of your old relationship. The world felt larger, more inviting, as if the universe itself were whispering to you that you were meant for more than just survival. You were meant to thrive. Your new sexual energy, far from being a shield of hardness, became a source of magnetism that others sensed instinctively. People felt drawn to your presence, not out of hunger or need, but out of a kind of reverence. You moved through the world with a softness and a power that no longer had to be explained. The drama of your past love faded into a quiet background, a story you could now tell without bitterness or shame. You had crossed a threshold, chosen one, and on the other side, everything you had lost had been replaced by something deeper, rarer, and far more beautiful. A fierce and gentle sovereignty, rooted in the certainty that no one could manipulate what you no longer offered as a sacrifice. With time, chosen one, your internal world blossomed in ways that surprised even you. The old wounds, once raw and exposed, had become the places where new growth took root, sending out shoots of self-trust and intuitive strength. You found that your energy was no longer spent patching up someone else's doubts or filling the empty spaces in their heart. Instead, it gathered and swirled within you, a living wellspring from which you drew courage, clarity, and even joy. It was in these quiet, private moments that you realized just how much you had changed, not only in your ability to resist manipulation, but in your relationship to yourself. You discovered that there was no need to prove your worth to anyone, least of all to someone who once made you feel like your light was too bright, your love too much. The new confidence in your sexuality did not come from bravado or conquest. It was born in the silent knowledge that you were whole, whether partnered or alone. No one could claim your body or spirit unless you chose to share them freely, and even then, only with those who met you at your level of truth. The old hunger for attention was replaced by a more sacred desire, to be known, truly known, and to know yourself without distortion or denial. Your ex-lover, who had once wielded your own longing against you, seemed diminished by your absence. The games they played with others no longer intrigued or disturbed you. Instead, you felt a subtle compassion for someone who had never learned the freedom you had found. You saw now how manipulation is born from fear, from a poverty of spirit that tries to feed on another's abundance. But your new sexual energy was not a feast for others. It was a feast for yourself, a source of quiet delight that radiated from within and required nothing in return. People around you felt this shift, responding to you with new respect, drawn to your authenticity, unsure of how to approach a person who was simply, unapologetically, themselves. You began to cultivate your life with the care and precision of an artist, chosen one. Each day you chose what to give your energy to, what to nurture, what to release. Old friendships that had supported the dynamics of your past fell away gently, and in their place came new connections, each based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Your passions, once muted by compromise, came roaring back to life. Music, movement, laughter, the endless possibilities of a body and soul finally at peace. You celebrated yourself in ways both quiet and bold, whether in the small rituals of self-care or in the dazzling freedom of nights spent dancing, singing, or simply breathing in the cool air under a canopy of stars. The most profound change was internal, invisible to those who looked only at the surface. You became fluent in your own desires, able to distinguish what was truly yours from what had been planted by others. You learned to say no without guilt, to say yes without fear, to move through intimacy at your own pace and on your own terms. Your ex-lover, for all their attempts, could find no foothold in the new terrain of your spirit. What once would have been a battlefield was now a sanctuary, sacred and inviolable, protected not by walls but by the simple power of your self-awareness. The ripple effect of your transformation touched everything. You inspired others, not by words, but by the undeniable energy of someone who has returned to themselves. You met the world with new eyes, full of possibility, and the world responded in kind. Where there had once been drama, now there was peace. Where there had been confusion, now there was purpose. The chapter that began with heartbreak had become a story of resurrection, a testament to the way pain can be transmuted into wisdom, loss into presence, and longing into unbreakable joy. And in this new season of your life, chosen one, you walked forward not as a survivor, but as a creator, writing your own future with a hand that trembled no longer, steady in the knowledge of your own unshakable worth. As the world around you shifted, chosen one, so too did the world within. The wounds that once ached with memory now pulsed with a new sensation, curiosity. It was as if, having reclaimed the fullness of your sexual energy, you also reclaimed your right to explore life's wonders, both new and familiar, without the heaviness of old expectations. This new curiosity was not frantic or desperate, it was patient and rich, as if each moment unfolded in its own time, asking you only to be present and alive. No longer did you chase after validation in the eyes of others. You realized the gaze you truly longed for was your own. Each morning, when you looked into the mirror, you met yourself with tenderness, honoring not just the resilience that carried you through heartbreak, but also the innocence that allowed you to love so deeply in the first place. The world, in turn, began to echo this transformation. The energy you carried, so quietly yet unmistakably your own, seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the spaces you entered. In your workplace, colleagues found themselves unconsciously leaning in to listen to your thoughts, drawn to the clarity and ease with which you spoke. In social gatherings, friends and strangers alike responded to your laughter, to the peace that radiated from your skin, to the rare sense of acceptance you brought wherever you went. Even those who once tried to take advantage of your openness felt a kind of boundary in your presence, a gentle but unwavering sense that your spirit was no longer accessible for manipulation. You had become a mystery again, but not because you were hiding. It was simply that the fullness of who you were could not be contained or defined by anyone else's need. You became a master of your own energy, learning to listen to its subtle movements. You knew when you needed solitude and when you craved company. You learned the art of pleasure that asked for nothing in return. A hand on your heart, a long walk under moonlight, the joy of music that vibrated against your ribs. The old stories that once defined you, of loss, of longing, of love, distorted by someone else's hunger, slowly lost their power over your narrative. Now, instead of living in reaction to what had been done to you, you found yourself creating moments that were entirely yours. This creation was sometimes wild, sometimes gentle, but always conscious, rooted in the unwavering truth that your energy was sacred and could only be shared by invitation, never by coercion or trickery. Your ex-lover, sensing this deeper change, watched from a distance. There were moments when their presence returned, a message, a chance meeting, a memory that drifted in on the wind. But you greeted these encounters with the steady warmth of someone who is forgiven, not for the sake of the other, but to set yourself free. You saw them as they were, stripped of the illusions you once wove around their face, and in that honest vision, there was no more anger, only the quiet understanding of two paths that had diverged. Where once their attempts at charm would have stirred confusion or longing in your heart, now they evoked only gratitude for the lessons learned and the freedom gained. Your circle of friends evolved as well. You began to attract kindred spirits, people who, like you, were committed to authenticity and growth. Conversations became deeper, laughter more genuine, silences more comfortable. You noticed how your sexual energy, once the site of struggle and manipulation, was now a source of quiet magnetism, drawing others not to your wounds, but to your wholeness. Romantic interest did not overwhelm or distract you, because you knew your own boundaries. You knew the difference between genuine connection and the allure of attention. The hunger to be seen, so powerful in your past, had been satisfied by your own gaze, leaving you free to meet others without fear or need. You delighted in your own body as never before. The curves, scars, and lines you once tried to hide became testaments to the journey you had traveled. Every sensation became a celebration, every breath a reminder that you were alive and sovereign. The pleasure you found in yourself was no longer tinged with guilt or shame, but infused with gratitude. You honored your desires, letting them guide you toward what was good and true, refusing to settle for anything that made you shrink or doubt. You came to understand that your new sexual energy was not merely about attraction. It was about alignment, about living in such a way that every part of you, from the wildest longing to the quietest hope, was welcomed and cherished. Through this journey, chosen one, you realized that what you had gained was not just the ability to resist manipulation, but the gift of real freedom. Freedom to be, to feel, to choose, and to love without the fear of losing yourself again. In this new life, chosen one, you discovered what it truly meant to be grounded in your presence. There was no longer a need to armor yourself against the world, for your strength came not from defense, but from alignment. Your sexual energy became a kind of gravity, not forceful or overwhelming, but steady and inevitable. You walked through the world with an ease that was hard-won, carrying within you the knowledge that no one, not even those who once knew your every vulnerability, could touch the depths you now guarded with wisdom and compassion. Your ex-lover's manipulations lost their power not because you despised them, but because they became irrelevant to the person you had become. When you crossed paths, you met them with a calm that surprised you both. There was no need to justify your decisions or explain the boundaries you had drawn. Your presence spoke for itself, conveying a message that could not be misunderstood. The games they tried to play, whether through guilt, charm, or subtle appeals to the past, landed softly and harmlessly, like rain on a roof long since repaired. Where you once might have been tempted to revisit the old patterns, now you felt only a gentle release, a sense of having moved beyond the reach of such stories. This new strength allowed you to invest more deeply in the relationships and passions that mattered. You became more generous, not with the desperate giving of the past, but with an abundance that flowed naturally from your own wholeness. Those close to you noticed the change and responded in kind. Intimacy became richer and more honest, friendships more resilient, your sense of belonging rooted in something deeper than approval or attention. You gave love, not as an offering to secure your place, but as a natural extension of your own fullness. You listened without losing yourself, supported others without depleting your reserves, and celebrated the joys of those around you without feeling left behind. Your sexual energy, once a battleground, became a language of trust and invitation. When you chose to share it, it was a conscious act, grounded in mutual respect and genuine affection. Partners who met you at this level found themselves disarmed, not by seduction, but by your authenticity. There was no need for masks or performances. You brought your whole self, and you expected nothing less in return. The vulnerability you once feared became your greatest strength, for it signaled that you were free to be seen, to be known, and to be loved as you truly were. In moments of solitude, you felt a profound contentment. There was no more aching for what might have been, no more wishing for someone else to fill the spaces within you. Instead, you discovered the joy of your own company, the delight in your thoughts, the peace in your silence, the endless curiosity about the world unfolding around you. You began to create, to dream, to pursue the adventures that once felt impossible. The energy that had been trapped in old cycles of longing and loss was now available for the life you were building, a life that belonged only to you. Chosen one, you understood at last that the greatest victory was not in winning someone else's affection or approval, but in reclaiming your own heart and honoring your own spirit. The manipulation of your ex-lover, once the axis on which your world turned, faded into the background, a distant memory with no power over your present. You stood at the center of your own life, sovereign and awake, radiating a presence that no one could mistake for anything but the truth of who you had always been, waiting only to be revealed. With every sunrise, you felt the quiet thrill of freedom, the freedom to feel, to desire, to love, and to walk away when love no longer served your highest good. You moved through the world as someone who had survived heartbreak but chosen, again and again, to remain open. In this way, your new sexual energy became more than a shield. It became a bridge, connecting you to others without fear, and to yourself without shame. And so in the wake of all you had overcome, you lived, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the enduring, transformative power of your own soul. As the seasons turned and the world continued to change around you, chosen one, you became something of a quiet legend to those who crossed your path. People who remembered you from the time before could sense a difference that was hard to name, but impossible to ignore. A shift in your energy, a new serenity beneath your laughter, a steadiness that made even chaos seem to part for you. Old friends, acquaintances, even those who once played a part in the web of your past, began to notice that you moved with a different rhythm, as if life's tempo had changed for you alone. It wasn't pride or arrogance. Rather, it was the invisible mark of someone who has tasted their own ruin and emerged with a rare, unbreakable joy. This new resonance could not be faked or imitated, for it came not from the fleeting victories of ego, but from the humility of having rebuilt yourself one breath, one choice, one honest moment at a time. Your former lover, once so adept at reading your moods and predicting your needs, found themselves unable to penetrate the calm field that now surrounded you. Their old ways, attempts at manipulation, the subtle games and loaded glances, became relics, ineffective in the presence of your authenticity. It was as though every trick they had ever used fell flat against the shield of your new self-knowledge. Where there once would have been a flicker of hope in their eyes as they tested your boundaries, now there was only confusion and eventually resignation. The more they tried to stir the waters of your heart, the more they were met not with resistance or hostility, but with the gentle indifference of someone who had simply moved on. The world responded to this change in ways both large and small. Opportunities arose where there had once been closed doors. People approached you not just for what you could offer, but because they sensed a kind of restfulness in your company, a presence that allowed them to let their guard down and be themselves. Even those who had once seen you as someone to be manipulated or outwitted now found themselves involuntarily respectful. It was not that you became hard or defensive. On the contrary, your vulnerability became a source of quiet strength, drawing others in while setting a clear boundary that could not be crossed by force or deceit. You noticed, too, that your capacity for empathy and compassion deepened in this new phase. The scars of your past, once sources of shame or anger, became windows through which you could see the pain and longing in others. You no longer needed to fix or rescue, to contort yourself to fit someone else's hunger. Instead, you listened and held space, offering the simple dignity of being present without judgment or agenda. People felt safe with you, not because you promised them what they wanted, but because you gave what was real. In this way, your presence became a gift, not just to yourself, but to everyone who crossed your path. The relationships that grew out of this energy were profoundly different from anything you had known before. Friendships became deeper, marked by honesty and trust. Romantic possibilities unfolded without pressure or haste, guided not by desperation or the need to prove your worth, but by a curiosity that honored both your desires and your boundaries. You found yourself drawn to people who met you with the same level of integrity, who recognized the journey you had taken and respected the sacredness of the space you now held. Your sexuality, far from being a tool or a weapon, became a language of connection, an invitation to intimacy that was both fearless and kind. And in the quiet hours, when you sat alone with your memories, you no longer felt haunted by the ghosts of your past. The pain that had once defined you now felt distant, a necessary crucible through which you had been refined. You could look back on every moment, the longing, the heartbreak, the confusion, and even the moments of manipulation, with a soft, almost bittersweet gratitude. For it was through these fires that you learned not only what you would never accept again, but what you were truly capable of giving and receiving. Your journey had transformed not just the way you loved others, but the way you loved yourself. In every corner of your life, there was now evidence of this new wholeness. The laughter that came easier, the peace that lasted longer, the joy that required no reason. The old narrative that you were defined by loss, that your worth was measured by someone else's desire, was gone, replaced by something wider and more liberating than you could have ever imagined. Each day felt like an unfolding, a new chance to explore the world not through the lens of scarcity or regret, but with a sense of abundance and possibility. Where you had once measured yourself against others, now you felt only the thrill of your own becoming. Your energy, especially your sexual energy, pulsed quietly in everything you did, a hum of life force, a secret that needed no explanation, drawing the right people and experiences into your orbit without effort or expectation. Your former lover, who had once played such a central role in your inner life, gradually receded from your thoughts. There were still moments, to be sure. Dreams, memories, an unexpected song or familiar place that pulled at an old thread. But these moments no longer caused pain or longing. Instead, they brought a kind of gentle closure, a sense of witnessing the end of a story that had shaped you, but no longer held you captive.